At exactly 9 p.m., the mahogany front doors of the Whitmore estate opened with a sound like thunder. The effect was instantaneous. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes froze halfway to lips. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to falter, their Mozart trailing off into uncertain silence. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as every head turned toward the entrance. Colonel David Henderson stood in the doorway like a force of nature contained in dress blues. At 52, he was still the most commanding presence I'd ever encountered. 6 feet 4 inches of pure military authority, his uniform so perfectly pressed it could have cut glass. His chest was a map of American military history: Purple Heart, Silver Star, Bronze Star, with 3 oak leaf clusters, Combat Infantry Badge, Ranger Tab, and at least a dozen ribbons I recognized from various theaters of operation. But it wasn't his decorations that made the room go silent. It was the way he carried himself, the absolute certainty in his bearing that marked him as a man accustomed to life and death decisions. In a room full of people who commanded boardrooms and country clubs, Henderson commanded battlefields. He wasn't alone. 2 other officers flanked him. A full colonel I didn't recognize, silver eagles gleaming on his shoulders, and a woman in navy dress whites whose insignia marked her as a commander. Behind them stood 4 enlisted personnel in ceremonial uniform, their presence turning the elegant foyer into something resembling a military formation. Mrs. Whitmore recovered first, her southern hospitality kicking in despite her obvious confusion. She glided toward the entrance with her hostess' smile firmly in place, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Good evening, gentlemen, and lady, of course. I'm Patricia Whitmore. I'm afraid there may be some confusion. This is a private party." Henderson's gaze swept the room with the methodical precision of a sniper acquiring targets. When his eyes found mine across the crowd, something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a recognition that sent a chill down my spine. "No confusion, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "We're here for Captain Mitchell." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Every eye in the room swiveled toward me like spotlights, and I felt simultaneously invisible and exposed. Marcus, who had been in the middle of charming a group of wedding guests, stood frozen with his mouth slightly open, his champagne flute forgotten in his hand. I walked toward Henderson, my dress shoes clicking against the marble floor with each measured step. The crowd parted before me like the Red Sea, creating a corridor between myself and the most decorated officer most of these people had ever seen in person. "Colonel Henderson," I said, stopping at the regulation distance and offering a crisp salute. "I wasn't expecting to see you here, sir." He returned the salute with the precision of 30 years in uniform. "Captain Mitchell, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation that requires your immediate expertise." The word expertise hung in the air like a challenge. From the corner of my eye, I could see Marcus's face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been the first stirring of actual fear. "Of course, sir. How can I assist?" Henderson glanced around the room, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the sea of expensive faces staring at us with undisguised fascination. His expression was unreadable, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes that meant he was calculating something. "Captain, are you familiar with Operation Nightfall?" The blood in my veins turned to ice water. Operation Nightfall. The most classified mission I'd ever been part of, buried so deep in black ops that even thinking about it in public made me nervous. 3 years ago, in the mountains of Afghanistan, I'd been part of a joint intelligence operation that had prevented what could have been one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history. The details were classified at levels that required congressional oversight to declassify. And Henderson had just mentioned it in a room full of Charleston socialites. "Yes, sir," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "Then you understand the sensitivity of what I'm about to discuss." He gestured to the unknown colonel beside him. "This is Colonel James Patterson, Defense Intelligence Agency. Commander Sarah Chen, Naval Intelligence. We've been tracking some concerning developments related to intelligence gathered during nightfall. Patterson stepped forward, his expression grim. Captain Mitchell, we have reason to believe that classified information from your operation has been compromised. Information that could jeopardize current operations and put American lives at risk. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Mrs. Whitmore had gone pale, her hostess' smile finally cracking under the weight of whatever was happening in her foyer. What kind of compromise, sir? I asked. Commander Chen spoke for the first time, her voice crisp and professional. We've identified several attempts to access classified databases using credentials that trace back to Operation Nightfall personnel. The attempts were sophisticated. Whoever is behind this has intimate knowledge of military intelligence protocols. My mind raced. Operation Nightfall had involved a small team of specialists, each with access to different pieces of the puzzle. If someone was using our credentials to access classified systems, it meant either one of us had turned, or someone had gotten close enough to one of us to steal their access codes. How many people are we talking about? I asked. 7 personnel had direct access to Nightfall materials, Patterson replied. As of this afternoon, we've cleared 5 of them. That leaves 2. He didn't need to say it, I was one of the 2. Sir, I haven't accessed any classified systems since my last deployment ended. My credentials should have been automatically suspended when I went on leave. They were, Chen confirmed, which makes it more interesting that someone tried to use them last Tuesday. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Someone had not only stolen my credentials, but had tried to use them recently. Either I was a traitor, or someone very close to me was. Henderson's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight nod that told me he believed me. Captain, we need to conduct a full security review. That means examining your personal relationships, your communications, your recent activities. His gaze swept the room again. Anyone who might have had access to your personal information. For the first time since the officers had arrived, I became aware of the crowd around us. Dozens of Charleston's elite, hanging on every word of a conversation that should have been happening in a secure facility, not at a garden party. And somewhere among them was someone who had betrayed not just me, but potentially countless American operatives still in the field. Sir, I said carefully, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more secure. Actually, Captain, Henderson said, and now there was something almost predatory in his smile. I think here is perfect. You see, one of the interesting things about these security breaches is their timing. They've all occurred in the past 6 months, coinciding with several personal events in your life. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a tablet. Your mother's birthday party in January, your college roommate's wedding in March, and most recently, queries made just this week, right around the time invitations were sent for this engagement party. The implications were staggering. Someone in my personal life, someone who knew my schedule, my relationships, my movements, was using that information to time cyber attacks on classified military systems. Colonel, I said, my voice tight with controlled anger, are you suggesting that someone at this party is involved in espionage? I'm not suggesting anything, Captain. I'm stating facts. Patterson stepped forward, his tablet glowing with what looked like forensic data. The most recent breach attempt occurred 3 days ago. The query originated from an IP address registered to a private residence here in Charleston. Mrs. Whitmore made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. Several guests began shifting nervously, as if proximity to espionage might be contagious. Henderson's voice cut through the murmur of growing panic. Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to remain calm. We're going to need to speak with each of you individually, just as a precaution. No one is under suspicion. Like hell they're not. Marcus's voice, loud and sharp with indignation, cut across Henderson's measured explanation. He stepped forward, his face flushed with either anger or champagne, pointing an accusatory finger at the assembled officers. This is absolutely ridiculous, he continued, his voice rising. You people show up here, disrupting a private party, making accusations. What kind of police state nonsense is this? Henderson turned toward Marcus with the slow deliberation of a tank turret acquiring a target. And you are? Marcus Thornfield. I'm the one getting married here, and I want to know what gives you the right to come into my fiancé's family home and start interrogating guests, like we're all criminals. No one is being interrogated, Mr. Thornfield. We're conducting a security review. Quote, a security review, Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. Of what? Sarah's thrilling career in military data entry? I mean, let's be realistic here. She's a clerk, for God's sake. What could she possibly know that would interest foreign spies? The silence that followed was profound. I watched Henderson's expression shift, subtle as a cloud passing over the sun, and I knew that Marcus had just made a very serious mistake. A clerk, Henderson repeated slowly. Yes, a clerk. Filing reports, organizing data, basic administrative work. I'm sure it's very important in its own way, but hardly the stuff of international espionage. Marcus gestured dismissively, playing to the crowd that was watching this exchange with growing fascination. I think you gentlemen have been watching too many spy movies. Colonel Patterson looked at Commander Chen, who looked at Henderson, and I saw something pass between them, a communication that didn't require words. Henderson stepped closer to Marcus, close enough that the height difference became pronounced. Mr. Thornfield, what exactly do you do for a living? I work in finance. Investment management, if you must know. And you consider that more strategically important than military intelligence? Marcus's confidence wavered slightly, but he pressed on. I consider it more realistic than whatever fantasy you people are spinning about Sarah being some kind of secret agent. Fantasy. Henderson's voice was flat, dangerous. Captain Mitchell, would you please enlighten Mr. Thornfield about the nature of your, quote, clerical duties during Operation Nightfall? Every instinct I had screamed against revealing classified information in a room full of civilians. But Henderson was my commanding officer, and he was giving me a direct order in front of witnesses. Sir, I'm not sure that's appropriate given the classification level. Captain? His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. These people are already involved, whether they know it or not. One of them has been accessing classified systems using intelligence stolen from you. They need to understand exactly what kind of damage could be done with that information. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to jump out of an airplane without knowing if my parachute would open. Operation Nightfall was a joint intelligence operation designed to infiltrate and neutralize a terrorist network, planning a coordinated attack on American soil, I began, my voice taking on the clinical tone I'd learned to use for classified briefings. The network had been planning simultaneous attacks on 3 major cities, using biochemical weapons that would have killed thousands of civilians. The room was utterly silent now. Mrs. Whitmore had gone white as her marble floors. My role was to analyze intercepted communications and identify key network members, their locations, and their operational timelines. Over the course of 6 months, I processed over 10,000 hours of intercepted communications, identified 47 high-value targets, and provided tactical intelligence that led to the successful neutralization of the entire network. Marcus's face had lost most of its color, but he wasn't backing down. That's just data analysis. Computers do most of the work these days. Commander Chen stepped forward, her voice ice cold. Captain Mitchell's analysis prevented the deaths of an estimated 50,000 American civilians. Her work was so exceptional that she was personally commended by the Secretary of Defense and received the Distinguished Service Medal, an honor rarely given to officers below the rank of colonel. Moreover, Patterson added, the intelligence methods she developed during Nightfall are now standard protocol for counterterrorism operations worldwide. Her clerical work has been saving lives for 3 years. I watched Marcus process this information, watched his worldview crack and reshape itself around the reality that the woman he'd dismissed as a paper pusher was, in fact, one of the most effective intelligence officers of her generation. But it was Henderson who delivered the killing blow. Captain Mitchell, he said, his voice carrying the formal weight of an official pronouncement, by the authority vested in me by the United States Army and the Department of Defense, I hereby inform you that you are being considered for promotion to major, with assignment as Deputy Director of Strategic Intelligence Analysis at the Pentagon. The words hit the room like a physical force. Deputy Director, Pentagon. I had heard of officers who would kill for that kind of assignment, and Henderson was offering it to me in front of a room full of people who thought I filed paperwork for a living. "Sir," I managed, "I'm honored, but the position comes with top secret/SCI clearance, oversight of 47 intelligence analysts, and a budget of $32 million annually." Henderson's smile was razor sharp. Quite a promotion for a clerk. Marcus stood frozen, his champagne flute dangling from nerveless fingers. Around the room, I could see faces processing what they'd just heard, recalculating their assumptions about the quiet Mitchell sister in the pretty uniform. But Henderson wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "this security breach changes everything. If classified information has been compromised through your personal connections, Captain, we may need to reconsider your eligibility for high-level positions." The threat was clear. My career, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd earned, could disappear if someone in this room had betrayed me. I looked around at the faces, staring back at me. Somewhere among these people, behind one of these polite Southern smiles, was a traitor who had put American lives at risk and was now threatening to destroy my future. "What do you need from me, sir?" I asked. Henderson gestured to Patterson, who stepped forward with his tablet. "We need a complete list of everyone who had access to your personal information over the past 6 months. Phone numbers, email addresses, social media connections, anyone who might have been able to guess your passwords or security questions. That could be dozens of people." "Then we'll interview dozens of people." Chen's voice was matter-of-fact. "Captain, we're not just talking about a security breach here. The information accessed using your credentials was used to compromise 3 active operations. 7 American operatives are dead because someone stole your identity." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. 7 people were dead. 7 families destroyed. Because someone had gotten close enough to me to steal information that had then been used to kill American soldiers. I thought about Marcus's dismissive comments, his casual cruelty, his assumption that nothing I did could possibly matter. How many times had I mentioned work around him? How many details had I let slip during family gatherings, thinking that no one was really listening? "We'll start with the people closest to you," Patterson said. "Family members, romantic relationships, close friends. Anyone who might have had regular access to your personal communications or living space." Quote, Jessica stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "What exactly are you looking for?" "Anything unusual, ma'am?" "Unexpected interest in Captain Mitchell's work. Questions about her schedule or assignments. Access to her personal devices or accounts." "I can tell you right now that Sarah never talks about her work," Jessica said firmly. "She's always been very careful about that." "What about passwords?" Chen asked. "Birthday dates, pet names, personal information that might be used for security questions?" I started to shake my head, then stopped. Over the past year, I'd been more relaxed about personal security. Family gatherings, casual conversations, the assumption that I was among people I could trust. There were a few times, I said slowly, when I had to access secure email during family visits. I might have mentioned password resets, security questions. "In front of whom?" Henderson's voice was sharp. I looked around the room, my gaze stopping on each face. Mrs. Whitmore, who'd always been curious about my exciting military career. Jessica, who'd never shown interest in my work but had been present for dozens of casual conversations. Various family friends who'd asked polite questions about my deployments. And Marcus, who'd dismissed everything I did as unimportant but had been around for every major family gathering in the past year. "Sir," I said carefully, "I think we're going to need to have individual conversations with several people." Henderson nodded grimly. "Patterson, set up interviews. I want this place locked down until we've spoken with everyone." "Chen, contact base security. I want a full forensic review of Captain Mitchell's personal devices and communications." As the officers began coordinating their investigation, I found myself standing alone in the middle of what had been a celebration just minutes earlier. The party was over, the elegant facade stripped away to reveal the harsh reality underneath. Somewhere in this room was a person who had betrayed their country for money, or ideology, or simple malice. Someone who had looked me in the eye, smiled at family gatherings, and then used information stolen from me to get American soldiers killed. I thought about Marcus's condescending smile, his casual dismissal of my service, his assumption that nothing I did could possibly matter, how wrong he'd been, how wrong they'd all been. But being right felt like a hollow victory when 7 people were dead and my career hung in the balance. The real investigation was just beginning. "Sarah's just a clerk," Marcus announced to the room, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension reserved for people he considered beneath him. "Nothing important." The champagne glasses clinked around my sister's engagement party while I stood there in my dress blues, ribbons on my chest meaning nothing to these people. But when Colonel Henderson walked through those mahogany doors an hour later and every conversation stopped dead, when he scanned the crowd and his eyes locked on mine with that familiar nod of respect, Marcus's smug smile began to crack. Because some clerks, as he was about to learn, keep secrets that can destroy kingdoms. The Whitmore estate sprawled across 40 acres of Charleston's most exclusive real estate, where Spanish moss hung from centuries-old oak trees like tattered battle flags. I'd forgotten how intimidating the place was, how the white columns rose like marble sentinels, how the circular driveway seemed to stretch for miles, how even the air felt thick with old money and older expectations. My rental car looked pathetic among the Bentleys and Mercedes lined up like expensive jewelry in the spring afternoon sun. The valets, dressed in spotless white uniforms that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, moved with choreographed precision. One of them approached my modest sedan with barely concealed disdain, as if touching the door handle might contaminate his white gloves. "Ma'am," he said with practiced politeness that didn't reach his eyes. I stepped out, feeling the familiar weight of my dress blue uniform. Every ribbon was aligned to regulation standards, every crease pressed to razor sharpness. My silver captain's bars caught the afternoon light, and my combat boots clicked against the cobblestone with military precision. In my world, this uniform commanded instant respect. Here, I might as well have been wearing a Target cashier's vest. The great hall of the Whitmore estate hadn't changed since I was a child. 20-foot ceilings, Italian marble floors that reflected the light from 3 massive crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of dead Whitmore ancestors staring down with judgmental eyes. The space could have housed a small airplane, but today it was filled with Charleston's social elite, all clutching champagne flutes and speaking in the carefully modulated tones of people who'd never raised their voices for anything more dramatic than a tennis match. I recognized most of the faces from the society pages. The Ashfords with their pharmaceutical fortune, the Beaumonts who owned half the historic district, the Carringtons whose shipping empire dated back to before the Civil War. They moved through the crowd like schools of expensive fish, clustering together in groups defined by net worth and bloodlines. Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell as I live and breathe. Mrs. Whitmore materialized beside me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 and Southern charm. Patricia Whitmore had been intimidating me since I was 7 years old, and apparently 3 years of military service hadn't changed that dynamic. She was perfectly preserved at 62, her silver hair styled in an elaborate updo that probably required engineering degrees to construct, her St. John knit suit the color of money. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, accepting her air-kiss greeting. "Thank you for having me." "Oh, honey, you know you're practically family." Her smile was warm enough to melt butter, but her eyes remained calculating. "Though I must say, I never expected to see you in uniform at a social gathering." "I came straight from the base," I lied smoothly. The truth was, I'd specifically chosen to wear my dress blues, let them see exactly who I'd become. Of course. How patriotic of you." She patted my arm with perfectly manicured nails. "Jessica will be so thrilled you made it. She's been simply beside herself with wedding preparations. 600 guests, you know. The ceremony will be at St. Philip's, naturally, and the reception here in the gardens. It's going to be the event of the season. 600 guests. I'd been to state funerals with smaller crowds. I'm sure it will be beautiful," I managed. "Oh, it will be. Marcus spared no expense, bless his heart. Did you know he flew in orchids from Thailand?" "Thailand? Can you imagine?" She leaned closer conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I think he's trying to impress the old families. New money, you know. His father made all that money in tech, very successful, but..." She waved her hand dismissively. "Well, success and breeding are 2 different things entirely." I nodded politely, though privately I thought Marcus fit in perfectly with Charleston's old guard. The casual cruelty disguised as charm, the way they could dismiss entire categories of people with a smile. He'd mastered it all. Sarah, quote. My sister's voice cut through the ambient conversation like a silver knife. Jessica glided toward us across the marble floor, and I was struck by how different she looked. Not just the expensive dress, a champagne-colored silk creation that probably cost more than my car, but everything about her posture, her expression, even the way she moved. She'd always been graceful, but this was different. This was choreographed. Jess, I hugged her, feeling how thin she'd gotten. Her collarbones were sharp against my uniform jacket. I can't believe you're actually here. She stepped back to look at me, her hands still on my shoulders. You look... She paused, and I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty? Embarrassment? You look very official. It's called a uniform, Jess. I wear it to work. Of course. I just meant... She glanced around nervously. Maybe we could find you something to change into? I think I have a dress that might... I'm fine in what I'm wearing. The silence stretched between us, filled with 3 years of distance and misunderstanding. Jessica had never understood why I'd enlisted straight out of high school, instead of going to college like a proper Whitmore family satellite. I'd never understood why she'd chosen to marry into the exact world I'd been desperate to escape. Well, I think you look absolutely fierce, darling. A man's voice, smooth as aged bourbon and twice as expensive. Marcus Thornfield appeared at Jessica's side like he'd been conjured from thin air, one arm sliding possessively around her waist. He was exactly what central casting would order for wealthy Southern gentlemen. Tall, perfectly groomed, with the kind of even tan that came from sailing and tennis rather than actual work. His smile was magazine perfect, revealing teeth that had clearly benefited from the finest orthodontic care money could buy. You must be the famous little sister, he continued, extending a hand with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been refused anything in his life. Marcus Thornfield, I've heard so much about you. I shook his hand, noting the softness of his palm, the manicured nails, the gold signet ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. Captain Sarah Mitchell. Captain? His eyebrows rose in what might have been surprise or amusement. Well, aren't you just full of surprises? Jessica told me you were in the military, but she didn't mention you were an officer. Quote, didn't she? I glanced at my sister, who was suddenly very interested in her champagne flute. No, she just said you did something with computers. Very technical, very important, I'm sure, but... He shrugged with the careless dismissal of someone who'd never had to work for anything. Well, you know how it is with military bureaucracy. Lots of paperwork, lots of filing, lots of administrative duties. The condescension in his voice was so thick you could have spread it on toast. Around us, I noticed several people had started to pay attention to our conversation. Wedding party members, I assumed, drawn by the novelty of an actual soldier at their garden party. Actually, I began, but Marcus had already turned to address his audience. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Jessica's sister, Sarah. His voice carried across the immediate area with the practiced projection of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. She's serving our country, which is absolutely admirable. Sarah, meet the wedding party. These are the people crazy enough to stand up with us next month. A small crowd gathered, drinks in hand, smiles politely interested. I recognized the type, people who viewed military service as something vaguely noble but entirely foreign, like charity work in Africa or rescuing endangered species. What branch? Asked a blonde woman in pearls the size of grapes. Army, I replied. How exciting! She clapped her hands together. My nephew was in the army. He was stationed in... Oh, where was it? Germany, I think. He said it was lovely. Very clean. Sarah's been overseas too, Jessica said quietly. Afghanistan. A brief, uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Afghanistan wasn't clean or lovely, and everyone knew it. Well, Marcus said with the smooth recovery of a practiced host, the important thing is that she's here now, safe and sound. He raised his champagne flute. To all our brave men and women in uniform, keeping us safe so we can enjoy evenings like this. The group murmured agreement and drank, and I could see in their faces that they considered the military topics safely dispensed with. Time to move on to more interesting subjects. like wedding flowers and honeymoon destinations. "What exactly do you do in the Army?" asked a man in a seersucker suit. Jessica mentioned something about computers. "I'm in intelligence," I said simply. "Oh, like hacking?" The blonde woman looked delighted. "How modern." Quote. Marcus laughed, the sound like expensive crystal being tapped with a silver spoon. "Nothing quite so dramatic, I'm afraid. Sarah's being modest. She's basically a clerk, aren't you, Sarah?" "Very important clerking, I'm sure, but still," he gestured vaguely. "Filing reports, organizing data, that sort of thing. The real heroes are the ones with the guns, of course." The casual dismissal hit like a physical blow. 3 deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart I'd never mentioned to anyone in my family, and countless nights spent analyzing intelligence that had saved American lives, reduced to clerking by a man who'd probably never had a job more strenuous than managing his trust fund. "Marcus," Jessica said softly, but there was no real reproof in her voice. "What? I'm being supportive." He turned back to the group with that practiced charm. "Not everyone can be on the front lines. Someone has to handle the paperwork, and thank God we have dedicated people like Sarah willing to do it." Several people nodded approvingly, as if Marcus had just delivered a profound insight into military operations. A few drifted away, already bored by the topic. "The important thing," Marcus continued, "is that you're here for Jessica's special day. Family first, right? No matter what people do for a living." He said it like he was being magnanimous, like my presence was some kind of charitable gesture on their part. The heat of anger crept up my neck, but I kept my voice level. "Right, family first." "Exactly," Marcus beamed as if I'd just agreed to something wonderful. "Now, has anyone seen the ice sculpture? It's absolutely magnificent. Jessica insisted on swans, didn't you, darling?" And just like that, the conversation moved on. Military service dispensed with. The uncomfortable topic of actual work dismissed. They returned to the important business of discussing centerpieces and catering options. I stood there for a moment, invisible in my dress blues, watching my sister laugh at something Marcus had whispered in her ear. She looked happy, I realized. Genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. The thought should have comforted me, but instead it felt like another small loss. "I need to get some air," I murmured to no one in particular. Jessica looked up. "Sarah, you don't have to." "I'm fine. Just want to see the gardens." I walked through the French doors onto the terrace, my heels clicking against the stone. The evening air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of magnolias and jasmine. Beyond the formal gardens, I could see the river in the distance, its surface reflecting the last light of the sun. This was where Jessica and I had played as children during the endless summer visits that defined our youth. Hide and seek behind the boxwood hedges, tea parties under the gazebo, elaborate games of make-believe, where we were pirates or princesses or explorers discovering new worlds. That was before I understood what this place really was, before I realized that the beauty was built on a foundation of casual cruelty, that the gracious manners masked a system designed to keep certain people in their place. Before I learned that in this world your worth was determined by your last name, your bank account, and your willingness to play by rules written by dead men in powdered wigs. I'd left at 18 and never looked back, enlisted the day after graduation, much to my family's horror. "But what about college?" my mother had wailed. "What about your future?" She couldn't understand that the military was my future, that I'd found a place where merit mattered more than pedigree, where respect was earned rather than inherited. My phone buzzed against my hip, a text from an unknown number. "Colonel Henderson will be arriving at 2100 hours. He specifically requested to speak with you, Chief Nakamura." I stared at the message, my blood going cold. Colonel David Henderson was my commanding officer from my last deployment in Afghanistan. More than that, he was a legend. A man who'd served 4 tours, earned a Silver Star, and commanded respect from generals and enlisted personnel alike. He didn't make social calls, and he certainly didn't track down off-duty officers at family parties. Unless something was very, very wrong, or very, very important. I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m., 13 minutes. My mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened at the base? Was there a security breach? An emergency deployment? But if it were any of those things, why come here? Why not just call me back to duty through official channels? The French doors opened behind me, and Jessica stepped onto the terrace. She'd grabbed a shawl from somewhere, a delicate cashmere thing that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Are you all right?" she asked, joining me at the stone balustrade. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine. You look like you want to hit something." I almost smiled. Even after 3 years apart, she could still read me better than anyone. "Maybe I do. He doesn't mean anything by it, Marcus. He just doesn't understand military culture." "He understands exactly what he's doing, Jess." She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the river. "He's a good man, Sarah. He takes care of me." "You don't need taking care of." "Don't I?" She turned to face me, and in the fading light I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Do you know what it's like being the poor relation at these things? Always wondering if people are talking to you because they like you or because they feel sorry for you. Always knowing that your dress came from Nordstrom instead of a designer, that your jewelry is nice but not quite nice enough." Jess. Marcus changed that. When I'm with him, I belong here. I don't have to apologize for who I am or where I came from. I can just be. The sadness in her voice broke something in my chest. I'd been so focused on my own discomfort, my own sense of displacement, that I'd forgotten Jessica had been navigating these same waters alone for 3 years. "You never had to apologize for anything," I said softly. "Not to these people, not to anyone. Easy for you to say, you left." The accusation hung between us like smoke. She wasn't wrong. I had left, and I'd never looked back. I'd built a life where my worth was measured by my actions, not my family connections or my bank account. But Jessica had stayed, trying to find her place in a world that had very specific ideas about where people like us belonged. "I left because I couldn't breathe here," I said finally. "All the rules, all the expectations, all the judgment disguised as politeness, it was killing me. And I stayed because I couldn't breathe anywhere else." She smiled sadly. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from a number I recognized, Lieutenant Colonel Martinez, the base communications officer. "Colonel Henderson's ETA confirmed. Full dress uniform recommended. This is not a social call." Full dress uniform? Not a social call. My stomach dropped. Whatever was happening, it was official. And serious. "I may have to leave early," I said to Jessica. "Work?" "Something like that." Quote. She nodded, accepting the vague explanation with the resignation of someone who'd grown accustomed to military schedules trumping family obligations. "Will you try to enjoy yourself until then? For me?" I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She was beautiful in the fading light, her hair catching the last rays of sun, her face soft with hope and concern. She was happy here, or at least as happy as she knew how to be. Who was I to judge that? "I'll try." "Thank you," she squeezed my hand. "And Sarah, whatever Marcus said in there, you're not just anything. You never were." She went back inside, leaving me alone with the darkening sky and the weight of growing dread. Through the French doors, I could see the party continuing its elegant progression. Marcus was holding court near the bar, gesturing expansively while a small crowd laughed at something he'd said. He caught sight of me through the glass and raised his champagne flute in a mock toast, that same condescending smile playing across his lips. "Just a clerk." The words echoed in my head as I checked my watch again. 8:59 p.m. 1 minute until my quiet evening became something else entirely. 1 minute until Marcus learned that some clerks carry secrets powerful enough to reshape the world. I straightened my uniform jacket, checked that my ribbons were properly aligned, and walked back into the lion's den. Whatever Colonel Henderson wanted, whatever crisis had brought him to Charleston on a Saturday evening, I would face it with the same precision and professionalism I brought to every mission. But first, I was going to enjoy watching Marcus's perfect world get turned upside down. The real party was about to begin. The Whitmore Estate's library had been transformed into a makeshift interrogation center within 20 minutes. Henderson's team moved with military efficiency, setting up secure communication equipment and interview stations, while the party guests were corralled in the main hall under the watchful eyes of the enlisted personnel. I sat in the wingback chair that had once been Mr. Whitmore's favorite reading spot, watching Colonel Patterson set up his laptop on the antique mahogany desk. The irony wasn't lost on me. This room had always been forbidden to children during my youth, deemed too precious for our grubby hands. Now it was serving as the nerve center for a national security investigation. "Captain Mitchell," Henderson said, settling into the chair across from me, "I need you to walk me through every interaction you've had with these people over the past 6 months. Every conversation, every casual comment about your work, every time you might have mentioned passwords or security protocols." I closed my eyes, forcing myself to think systematically. It started with Christmas dinner at Jessica's apartment. She'd just gotten engaged, and Marcus was there. He asked the usual questions: where I was stationed, what I did, whether I'd seen combat. "What did you tell him?" Standard cover story. Intelligence analysis. Mostly desk work. Nothing dramatic. I paused, remembering. But Jessica mentioned that I'd received some kind of commendation. She didn't know what it was for, but she was proud. Marcus seemed dismissive. Commander Chen looked up from her tablet. Dismissive how? He made some comment about participation trophies, how the military probably gave out medals for showing up on time. The memory still stung. I let it slide because it was Jessica's night. Patterson's fingers flew over his keyboard. What about access to your personal devices? Phone, laptop, anything with saved passwords? I was careful about that. Military training, but I hesitated, remembering something that had seemed innocuous at the time. There was one incident in February. I was staying at Jessica's place for her birthday weekend, and my phone died. I needed to check my secure email for some administrative stuff, leave requests, that sort of thing. You used someone else's device? Henderson's voice was sharp. Jessica's laptop, but I used incognito mode, made sure to clear the browser history, all the standard precautions. I felt sick as I continued. Marcus was there. He offered to help me set up the VPN connection, said he worked with secure networks in his finance job. The three officers exchanged glances that made my stomach drop. "Captain," Chen said carefully, "what exactly did he help you with?" He said Jessica's laptop had some security settings that might interfere with military encryption. He adjusted some network settings, helped me connect to the base VPN. The full implications hit me like a truck. Oh, God. He could have installed monitoring software. More than that, Patterson muttered, typing furiously. If he had administrative access to the machine while you were connected to classified systems, he could have captured your login credentials, security tokens, everything. Henderson stood abruptly. How long was he alone with the laptop? I went to take a shower while the system was updating. Maybe 30 minutes? I felt like I was going to be sick. He said he'd make sure everything finished installing properly. 30 minutes is plenty of time to install sophisticated surveillance software, Chen confirmed. Captain, think carefully. After that incident, did you notice anything unusual? Unexpected emails, strange notifications, any indication that your accounts had been compromised? I thought back through the months following Jessica's birthday. There were a few times when I had to reset passwords. The system said there had been unusual login attempts from unknown locations. But that happens sometimes with military networks. The security is so tight that it flags everything as suspicious. Those weren't false alarms, Patterson said grimly. Someone was using your credentials to probe the system, testing how much access they could gain without triggering major alerts. The door opened and one of the enlisted men entered. Sir, we've completed the preliminary interviews with the party guests. Most of them check out clean, local socialites with no apparent connections to foreign intelligence. But we've identified 3 individuals who warrant deeper investigation. Henderson nodded. The fiancé? Marcus Thornfield is definitely one of them. His background check revealed some interesting details. He claims to work in investment management, but his actual employment history is unusual. Patterson looked up from his laptop. Define unusual. He's supposedly employed by Thornfield Capital Management, which is a legitimate investment firm. but our financial intelligence contacts ran his portfolio activity, and there are some red flags. Large cash deposits from unidentified sources, wire transfers to offshore accounts, investment patterns that don't match someone with his supposed client base. My mind raced. What kind of red flags? The kind that suggest money laundering, Chen said bluntly, or payments from foreign intelligence services. Henderson's expression was granite. Who are the other two suspects? Thomas Beaumont and Catherine Ashford. Both have had unusual travel patterns over the past year. Multiple trips to countries with significant intelligence operations against the United States. And both have been asking questions about Captain Mitchell's work at various social gatherings. I remembered Thomas Beaumont, old Charleston money, shipping fortune, the kind of man who collected military memorabilia and loved war stories. He'd cornered me at several parties, pressing for details about my deployments, my specific assignments, the kind of intelligence work I did. Beaumont always seemed genuinely interested in military history, I said. I thought he was just being polite. Genuine interest can be a cover for intelligence gathering, Henderson replied. What about Catherine Ashford? I had to think harder about her. Catherine was younger, maybe mid-30s, married to pharmaceutical money. She'd always been friendly but never particularly curious about my work. I don't remember her asking many questions about my job, I admitted. According to our interviews, she didn't ask you directly, the enlisted man said, but she pumped other guests for information. Ask Jessica about your deployment schedule, your security clearance level, whether you ever brought work home. She was gathering intelligence secondhand, Chen realized. Smart tradecraft, less suspicious than direct questioning. Patterson's laptop chimed with an incoming message. He read it quickly, his expression growing dark. We just got the forensic results from Captain Mitchell's compromised accounts. The access attempts weren't random probing. They were targeted searches for specific classified programs. Which programs? Henderson demanded. Operation Nightfall, as we suspected, but also Operation Desert Shield, Operation Iron Curtain, and Operation Silver Star. Patterson looked up from his screen. These are all operations that Captain Mitchell had some level of access to during her various assignments. Quote, the scope of the betrayal was staggering. Whoever had stolen my credentials hadn't just compromised one operation. They'd systematically accessed information from multiple classified programs spanning several years of my career. How much damage are we talking about? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Potentially catastrophic, Chen said. The information accessed could compromise dozens of ongoing operations, expose hundreds of assets, and put thousands of American personnel at risk. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, staring out the library window at the gardens where party guests were being individually questioned by his team. Captain, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need a completely honest answer. Of course, sir. Is there any possibility that you voluntarily shared this information with anyone? Any chance that you discussed classified matters with family members, romantic partners, anyone at all? The accusation hit like a slap. Absolutely not, sir. I have never violated operational security protocols. I had to ask. The alternative explanations are limited. He turned back to face me. Either you're a traitor or someone close to you is a very sophisticated intelligence operative. Or both, Patterson added grimly. Before I could respond, the library door burst open. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face flushed with indignation and what looked like genuine fear. Behind him, I could see one of Henderson's enlisted men reaching for his sidearm. This is insane, Marcus declared, stepping into the room despite the obvious weapons trained on him. You people can't just hold us prisoner based on some paranoid conspiracy theory. Henderson rose slowly from his chair. Mr. Thornfield, you were instructed to wait in the main hall. I was instructed to submit to interrogation by people who have no legal authority over American citizens. Marcus's voice was shaking with barely controlled anger. I want to call my lawyer. You're welcome to call your lawyer, Chen said calmly. But you should know that we've just received some very interesting information about your financial activities. Marcus went very still. What kind of information? Patterson turned his laptop screen toward us. Wire transfers from accounts linked to the Russian SVR, payments from Chinese military intelligence fronts, and a rather substantial deposit from an Iranian shell company, all within the past 6 months. Quote, the color drained from Marcus's face. There has to be some mistake. No mistake, Henderson said. We've also traced the IP address used in the security breaches. The attacks on classified military systems originated from your home network, Mr. Thornfield. That's impossible. I don't know anything about military systems. But you know about computer networks, I said, standing up from my chair. You helped me connect to the base VPN. You had access to Jessica's laptop while I was logged into classified systems. Marcus's eyes darted between the officers, and I could see him calculating, trying to find a way out. Even if that were true, which it's not, how would I know what to look for? I'm not a spy, I'm a financial advisor. You're right, Chen said. You're not a spy. You're an asset. The distinction hit Marcus like a physical blow. In intelligence work, there's a crucial difference between a spy, a trained intelligence officer working for a foreign government, and an asset, a civilian recruited to provide information or services. Someone recruited you, Henderson continued. Someone who knew about your relationship with Captain Mitchell, who understood that you could gain access to her personal information and use it to compromise classified systems. This is ridiculous, Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Patterson pulled up another screen on his laptop. 3 months ago, you were approached by a woman named Elena Volkov at a financial conference in Miami. Russian national, ostensibly working for a European investment firm, actually an SVR operative specializing in asset recruitment. Marcus's face went white. How do you? We've been watching Elena Volkov for 2 years, Chen interrupted. She specializes in recruiting American civilians with access to sensitive information. Her usual approach is to identify targets through social media analysis, then make contact at professional events. She offered you investment opportunities, didn't she? I said, the pieces falling into place. Exclusive deals, insider information, the chance to make serious money. Marcus said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. Henderson stepped closer. Here's what happened, Mr. Thornfield. You were recruited by Russian intelligence to gather information about Captain Mitchell's work. They probably told you it was harmless, just basic intelligence about American military capabilities. Nothing that would hurt anyone. Quote, but it wasn't harmless, I continued, anger building in my voice. 7 American operatives are dead because of the information you stole. 7 families destroyed because you wanted to make some easy money. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, Marcus burst out, then immediately looked stricken that he'd admitted anything. But you did mean to betray your country, Henderson said flatly. You did mean to steal classified information and sell it to foreign agents. Marcus slumped into a chair, his carefully constructed facade finally crumbling. She said it was just background information, basic stuff about military organization, nothing operational. I never thought... You never thought 7 people would die? Chen's voice was ice cold. You never thought that American soldiers would be killed because of your greed? It wasn't supposed to happen like that, Marcus whispered. Henderson pulled out his phone and made a brief call. Within minutes, 2 FBI agents entered the library, their badges prominently displayed. Marcus Thornfield, one of them said, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy to commit treason, and accessory to murder in the deaths of 7 American intelligence operatives. As they read him his rights and led him away in handcuffs, Marcus looked back at me one last time. Sarah, I'm sorry. You never meant to get caught, I said. That's the only thing you're sorry about. After Marcus was taken away, the library fell silent, except for the soft clicking of Patterson's keyboard as he processed the confession and coordinated with various intelligence agencies. What happens now? I asked Henderson. Now we clean up the mess, he replied. The information Thornfield provided to the Russians will need to be assessed for damage. Operations will need to be modified or scrapped entirely. Assets will need to be relocated. And my promotion? Henderson studied me for a long moment. Captain, you were the victim of a sophisticated intelligence operation. Your security protocols were exemplary. No reasonable person could have anticipated that a family member's romantic partner would be recruited by foreign intelligence. But the Pentagon promotion is off the table. Not because of any fault on your part, but because you're now a known quantity to hostile intelligence services. They'll be watching you, looking for new angles of approach. I nodded, understanding the logic even though it stung. What are my options? Several, actually. The CIA has expressed interest in your analytical skills. NSA is looking for someone with your background for a new counterintelligence program. Or you could stay with Army intelligence and take a position training the next generation of analysts. Before I could respond, the library door opened again. This time it was Jessica, escorted by one of Henderson's enlisted personnel. My sister looked shell-shocked, her perfect party dress wrinkled, her carefully styled hair disheveled. "Is it true?" she asked, without preamble. "Is Marcus really a spy?" "He's an asset recruited by Russian intelligence," I said gently. "Yes, it's true." Jessica sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "How long have you known?" "I didn't know anything until tonight. I'm as shocked as you are." "But you suspected something, didn't you? That's why you always seemed uncomfortable around him." I thought about all the times Marcus had dismissed my service, belittled my work, treated me like an inconvenience at family gatherings. I thought he was just an arrogant trust fund kid. I never imagined he was working for foreign intelligence. 3 years, Jessica whispered. "I've been with him for 3 years. I was going to marry him." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. How could I have been so stupid? "You weren't stupid," I said firmly. "You were targeted. Marcus was recruited specifically because of his relationship with you, because it gave him access to me." Henderson cleared his throat diplomatically. "Ms. Mitchell, you'll need to be debriefed by our security team. It's standard procedure when a civilian has been in close contact with a foreign asset." "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all, but we need to understand what information Marcus might have gathered about your sister through you, and whether there are any ongoing security concerns." Jessica nodded numbly. "Whatever you need." Over the next several hours, the investigation continued. Thomas Beaumont turned out to be exactly what he appeared, a military history enthusiast whose interest in my work was genuine but harmless. Catherine Ashford was more complicated. She had been gathering information about me, but for gossip purposes rather than espionage. She'd been collecting details about the mysterious Mitchell sister to share with her social circle, not realizing that her casual intelligence gathering was being monitored by actual intelligence operatives. By dawn, the Whitmore estate had been thoroughly processed. Marcus was in federal custody, facing charges that would likely result in life in prison. The party guests had been released after providing detailed statements, though several would face ongoing scrutiny from various intelligence agencies. I stood on the terrace where this had all begun, watching the sun rise over the Charleston harbor. The party debris had been cleared away, the elegant facade restored. But everything had changed. The perfect world that Marcus and Jessica had built together was revealed to be a lie constructed around betrayal and treason. Jessica joined me on the terrace, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the kitchen. "So what happens now?" she asked, echoing my earlier question to Henderson. "Now we rebuild," I said. "You go back to your life, figure out who you are without Marcus. I go back to mine and try to serve my country in whatever way they'll let me." "Will you take one of those jobs Colonel Henderson mentioned?" I'd been thinking about that question all night. The CIA position would be prestigious, the NSA role groundbreaking, the training assignment personally rewarding. But after everything that had happened, I found myself drawn to a different path. "Actually, I think I'm going to do something else entirely." "What?" I smiled, thinking about Marcus's condescension, his casual dismissal of my service, his assumption that nothing I did could possibly matter. "I'm going to write a book about intelligence work, about the real sacrifices military personnel make, about how national security actually works." "A book?" Too many people think what we do is just clerking or paperwork. They don't understand that behind every military action, every diplomatic initiative, every decision to go to war or make peace, there are intelligence professionals risking their lives to provide accurate information. Jessica was quiet for a moment, sipping her coffee and watching the harbor traffic. Marcus always said your work wasn't important. Marcus was wrong about a lot of things. Will you write about what happened here? I considered the question. The story of how a Charleston socialite's fiancé had been recruited by Russian intelligence to steal classified military secrets would certainly make for compelling reading. But more than that, it illustrated something important about modern espionage. How foreign intelligence services targeted ordinary Americans, exploiting personal relationships and social connections to gain access to sensitive information. I think I will, I said finally. People need to understand that the spy wars aren't just happening in shadowy government buildings and foreign embassies. They're happening in our living rooms, at our family gatherings, through our personal relationships. And Marcus? I thought about my sister's ex-fiancé, probably sitting in a federal holding cell, facing the reality that his greed had cost American lives and destroyed multiple families, including his own. Marcus learned that some clerks keep secrets that can destroy kingdoms, I said, but he also learned that kingdoms built on lies don't last very long. Jessica nodded, understanding. We stood together in comfortable silence, watching Charleston wake up to a new day. The investigation was over, the immediate crisis resolved, but the work of rebuilding would take much longer. 6 months later, I was at the Pentagon, not as Deputy Director of Strategic Intelligence Analysis, but as a special consultant on counterintelligence training. My book proposal had been approved by the Department of Defense, and I was working on a manuscript that would help Americans understand the real nature of modern espionage. Marcus Thornfield pleaded guilty to espionage charges and was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The information he'd provided to Russian intelligence had indeed compromised multiple operations, but aggressive damage control had prevented additional American casualties. Jessica had moved back to Charleston, taken a job with a nonprofit organization supporting military families, and was slowly rebuilding her life. She never mentioned Marcus, and I never asked. And sometimes, late at night when I was working on my book, I would think about that engagement party and Marcus's condescending smile when he'd dismissed me as just a clerk. He'd been wrong about so many things, but he'd been especially wrong about the power of underestimation. In intelligence work, the most dangerous operatives are often the ones nobody suspects, the ones who blend into the background, the ones dismissed as unimportant, the ones people mistake for clerks. What they built on assumptions crumbled when the truth finally emerged. In a world of secrets and lies, the most dangerous weapon isn't always the one you can see coming. Sometimes justice wears dress blues and carries the weight of 7 fallen heroes who deserved better than betrayal disguised as love. If you felt Sarah's fight was worth fighting, comment 1. If you think Marcus got what he deserved, comment 2. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories where underestimation meets its match. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.